It's another edition of the Wrap-Up Show with John Schaefer and Jim Russell, presented by Mark Nimitz at Farmers Insurance. Remember, subscribe to our channel for exclusive year-round Padres content right down there. Like these videos. Follow us on Twitter at John Schaefer, at Jim Russell SD. And let's tell you about our buddy over at Farmers Insurance, Mark Nimitz. If you're shopping for auto, home, renters, or life insurance, there's only one place to turn, and that's to a San Diegan, Mark Nimitz. At Farmers, he's got a decade of experience helping people like you and I find the perfect insurance products. He's also a lifelong San Diegan, and he lives and dies on every pitch like you and I do. Support the show. Click the link down below in the description to get Mark's website and let him help you and your family with your insurance needs.
Yeah, super excited to have Mark on board. If you have any questions for him, super easy to contact him. You can email him at mnimitz@farmersagent.com. That's mnimitz@farmersagent.com.
Let's get right to it, Jim. There is a report from Buster Olney within the last 24 hours that Aaron Boone could emerge as a viable candidate for the Padres. Here's the tweet. The Yankees haven't announced what their intentions are with their manager, whose contract expires right after the World Series. He can be a free agent then, and there's speculation inside the industry he could emerge as a viable candidate for the Padres if he leaves the Yankees. So, Jim, what do you think? I mean, who says no? He's a Southern Californian. If you look at the wins and losses, I know he's lost some big games as the Yankees manager. I understand it. You could look at that. But he's one of the winningest managers in the history of baseball. He's won 60% of his games, had a lengthy big league playing career, has done well in New York. Would he fit, in your opinion, in San Diego?
I saw the tweet yesterday, and one of the first things I did was look at the comment section, because Yankees fans always have an opinion. They always, if the guy doesn't win a championship, they're not happy with him. And that's exactly the case with Aaron Boone. It seemed like 85% of Yankees fans just want to get him out of town. And you sent me one tweet that said, I'll pay for his flight to San Diego. Yeah. Well, I'll pick him up from the airport, because I would think that Aaron Boone is the perfect candidate for the Padres position. And it's not just because he was the Yankees manager. I think it's because he brings a lot of things that this team needs to the table. One, he demands respect. Okay. Coming from the Yankees job, how many times he's gone to the playoffs? Like 5 straight years, or 5 years out of 6. Like, it's a crazy amount of number.
I think it's 4. He's managed for 4 years. He's brought them to the postseason 4 years.
Okay. And he's brought them to an ALCS. Of course, the ALCS, they lost against the Astros that were cheating. He made the postseason this year. He made the postseason last year and dealt with a bunch of injuries. Like, that team has been decimated by injuries, COVID protocol the last couple of years, and they still have prevailed and made the postseason. So he brings respect. Number 2, he sticks up for his players, like, no matter what. I can't, like, you see all those videos of him, going out, arguing with the umpires, not because he just wants to argue, but he's sticking up for his players. And I think that shows a lot to a clubhouse when a manager does that at times. And I've seen, I think it was this year in Oakland. I'm not sure if it was Oakland, but one of the times he went out and he was arguing for one of his players. Every single one of those players was on the top step, like, looking at Aaron Boone, like, and that to me just tells me how much respect he has in that clubhouse from those players. And this is New York. This is not Seattle or Texas. This is, they got some big names in that clubhouse. Stanton, Judge, Rizzo, like, massive names. So he demands respect of the clubhouse. And also, too, this guy is not old school. He's not new school. He has a mix of both. Analytics, old school. And I think that that's exactly what AJ Preller is looking for. And he's not some 60-year-old guy. He's not a 24-year-old guy. I think it's a perfect fit for what the Padres need. And, oh, by the way, he has San Diego ties, so that's even better.
And the other thing, the knock on Aaron Boone has been, first of all, he doesn't give you the fair assessment of his team when the team's not playing good baseball, but either did Jace Tingler, and I don't think it's a factor, to be honest with you, in San Diego. So what? And the other thing is the bullpen usage. But every single manager in baseball is criticized with bullpen usage, especially the really good teams. Dave Roberts, consistently, he's the winningest manager in the history of the sport and just won a World Series. We've seen it obviously in San Diego. Of course, you're going to get it in New York and Boston and these big markets. So he's been critical, or the media has been critical, and fans have been critical of the way he's used his bullpen. He hasn't won the quote unquote big game. It's the Yankees. You need to win a World Series, but he's got a 601 winning percentage in 4 seasons. Like you said, he's been to the postseason 4 consecutive years. I think ultimately the Yankees might want him back. We're seeing reports now out of New York that Hal Steinbrenner may be inclined to bring him back. He is a free agent at the end of the World Series, so if they don't lock him up, he could absolutely walk, and maybe he sees San Diego as a viable option for him. But I also think that there's at least a possibility, Jim, and maybe it's a decent possibility that he's back in New York in 2022.
Yeah, if you're the Yankees, I think it would be a massive mistake to not bring him back, because if you don't bring him back, you better have a better option than Aaron Boone. And that was the case that I said with Jace Tingler is you get rid of Jace Tingler, you better have a plan in place. Like you better have already talked about, all right, if we do this, if we get rid of Jace Tingler, this is the route we need to go. And that's what I think the Yankees may be figuring out. They may be looking at the situation where, if we get rid of him, what better option will there be? Like he's brought us to the postseason 4 straight years. The clubhouse and the dynamic there is great. You don't hear any turmoil in that clubhouse like you heard with San Diego. So yeah, I think that if the Yankees don't bring him back, that's a mistake on their part. But looking at the Padres angle of this whole thing, I hope they don't bring him back. I hope they don't, because there's only 2 real options right now for manager positions, and it's the Mets and it's the Padres. And he's not going to the Mets, right? He's not going across the street to the Mets. And the only other option would be San Diego. So I think that if you're AJ Preller right now, you're probably looking at that situation. If you might have already talked to some people, you might have, a gist of like what's going to happen. So you may not look at these reports like they're anything that, he could not return to the Yankees. Well, you already might know that he's already returning to the Yankees. So there's no reason to even bother and no reason to even think about it. But if he has heard, AJ Preller, anything that he might not return to New York, do you think it would be wise of Preller to maybe wait this thing out to see what happens with Aaron Boone? Or do you think he should just, move along and interview candidates and get a manager here as soon as possible?
I think it's a great question. I think you got to wait it out because of the way October is structured in baseball, where you're not supposed to make hires. I think you're like warned of making hires. I think theoretically you can if there's a break.
You can on an off day, but you have to wait to announce it until after the World Series.
Exactly. So, I think you want to do your due diligence. And by the way, it might not be just Aaron Boone. What if Dusty Baker is bounced in the first round? They might not be. But what if the Astros don't want Dusty Baker back, who's 72 years of age? So maybe you would interview someone like Dusty Baker. Maybe there's another coach or someone on a staff that you'd want to consider that's in the postseason right now. There's some other names that are popping up that we'll get into over the course of the next week or two. I mean, we've talked about Bochy a ton, Ron Washington yesterday. If you missed that video, go back and watch that video. I think we had a lot of good insight on the situation right now, where it stands with Ron Washington. And then there's other names. I mean, Brad Ausmus, who's been a long-time manager. It hasn't worked out. Buck Showalter, who's in his mid-60s. Jeff Bannister, a hard-nosed guy who's managed before as well in the big leagues that has ties to AJ Preller. Here's my question for you, Jim. Where are you ranking these 2 guys, Ron Washington and Aaron Boone? Because they're different, obviously. I mean, Boone, where he is in his career and his managerial experience, a little less than Ron Washington, has never gotten to a World Series, but he'd be a younger manager with experience. Then you got Ron Washington, who's so likable, but hasn't managed since that opportunity with the Rangers all the way back in like 2014 now.
Yeah, if those 2 are available, if Aaron Boone and Ron Washington are both available, my tier would be Boone 1, Washington 2. I would prefer Aaron Boone over Ron Washington. Not saying that Ron Washington. Is it
because of off the field? Is it because of some of the off the field stuff or no?
Not really. I don't like that. I don't really play that a factor into this whole thing. It might be a factor down at Petco Park, inside that organization. But I'm looking at recent things that have happened. And recently, Aaron Boone has been a manager, and the last 4 seasons, he's made the postseason. When's the last time that Ron Washington was a manager of a ball club? Like 5, 6 years ago? Okay, yeah, so 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that should be a huge knock on him, But at the same time, Aaron Boone is kind of I feel like the perfect mix of, demands respect. He's young enough, but he's not old enough. That's the criteria that, Peter Seidler's talking about. The analytics that he deploys is kind of, I think, what AJ Preller is looking for. And the biggest thing is he demands the respect of a clubhouse. If he can have the respect and control the clubhouse in New York with the Yankees, there's no doubt in my mind that he could do the same exact thing in San Diego. And if he can't, then you really have to say, okay, it was never the manager that was the problem here. It was the players.
Let me read you this as well. And I'm not sure if this was I believe this is from today, from Kevin Acee, talking about Aaron Boone specifically. Let me find the exact paragraph. Regarding Boone, one person familiar with how both teams operate in terms of strategy handed down from the front office said Boone would likely find managing in San Diego attractive because the Padres manager has more autonomy than Boone has as Yankees manager. That's interesting. And we've heard that actually. We've heard that now play out from multiple sources that as much as we like to say the front office is pulling all the strings in San Diego, they might be before games, but once you get into games, which is, to some extent obvious, there's only so much that can be drawn up beforehand.
Right.
But the idea that the front office, the Padres, puts their manager in a position to succeed between the white lines, maybe it's different than the Yankees, who maybe are more analytically driven. And by the way, I think all the clubs are analytically driven, including the Padres. But maybe Boone would have a little more flexibility in game and a little more autonomy, to use Kevin Acee's words, in San Diego. Maybe it is more attractive. There's less pressure, arguably, although the window's right now. I mean, obviously, there's less pressure. Right? There's nothing like New York.
No.
If you don't make the World Series, it's World Series or bust, right? They haven't won one since 2009.
He's made the postseason 4 straight years, and all fans in New York want him out. That's crazy.
Yeah. And what about
San Diego would love him?
And the one other name I'll mention, and we're going to get into all the candidates, right, over the next couple of weeks, whether it's a Bochy, whether it's a Jeff Bannister, there's other names. What about a Luis Rojas? We've seen this play out a little bit on social media. The possibility of Rojas even being on Boone's staff or vice versa. I don't think vice versa. Boone's going to manage next year. But Luis Rojas, who maybe got dealt an unfair hand with the Mets, and I think some people are very high on his abilities and what he does in a clubhouse. And we talked about that a little bit with Tingler too when he was first brought on. Can you get an all-star staff underneath him? You could argue now in retrospect they really didn't. No. But if you got Boone with Rojas, the two managers of the New York clubs in 2021 on your bench in 2022, that would be pretty appealing, I think.
I think if you're looking at perfect scenarios, you might say Bruce Bochy would be the number one choice in perfect scenario.
Yep.
But if you're going to also give me the option of potentially Aaron Boone with Rojas as his bench coach, assistant manager, that's a pretty enticing and appealing number 2 option. If those were the choices that I had, because like you said, 2 New York managers, and instead of getting one manager, you get 2 managers. You get Aaron Boone and Luis Rojas. And this team desperately, it sounds like, in that clubhouse needs structure and it needs leadership. And you get those 2 guys to come to San Diego. I think that would be, I don't know this or anything, but I think that might be AJ Preller's dream scenario. I don't know, but that's pretty hard to pass up if that option is there.
Here's my question for the comments section. If you're watching our video today, if you had the choice between Ron Washington or Aaron Boone, who are you choosing and why? Leave your comment down below. Again, if you're not subscribing to our videos, you need to do so. We're giving you exclusive year-round Padres content. If you're a Padres fan, subscribe. Hit that button down below. Hit the notification bell as well. Like our videos. Follow us on Twitter @JohnSchaefer, @JimRussellSD. And you've been watching the Wrap-Up Show with John Schaefer and Jim Russell, presented by Mark Nimitz at Farmers Insurance.